I've lived in this apartment complex for years. Pretty ordinary place, quiet most of the time. But there's this guy, Dave, lives one floor down. We've never really seen eye to eye. Parking spots are limited, and last week, it blew up into a full-blown argument between us. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and it ended with us both walking away fuming. Since then, things felt off. Every time I saw him in the hallway, he'd shoot me this unsettling glare. I brushed it off, hoping it would blow over. But last night, something happened that shook me to my core. It was well past midnight, and I was just getting ready for bed when I heard this knock at the door. I hesitated, not expecting anyone at this hour. When I finally opened it, there he was, Dave, standing in the dimly lit hallway, this creepy grin plastered on his face. I tried to keep it civil, asking what he wanted, but his tone was off, almost eerie. He mumbled something about needing to talk about the parking space again. It didn't make sense. I could feel this tension, this strange energy radiating from him, and it set my nerves on edge. He didn't budge, just stood there, eyes fixed on me. It was unnerving. His gaze felt intrusive, like he was looking through me. I tried to politely tell him it wasn't the time, that I needed to sleep, but he insisted, his demeanor becoming more aggressive, his voice taking on this ominous tone. I was on edge, trying to keep my cool, but my instincts were screaming at me that something wasn't right. I managed to close the door, but he lingered outside, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, haunting in the silence. I double-checked the locks, my heart racing as I glanced through the peephole. He was just standing there, staring at my door, this twisted smile etched on his face. It was chilling, to say the least, and I felt this rush of fear engulf me. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was nothing, that he was probably just drunk or something. But the feeling lingered, this sense of being watched, this ominous presence lurking just beyond the walls. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak of the building sounded like footsteps approaching my door. I kept replaying the encounter with Dave in my head, trying to make sense of it, but it just felt wrong, like there was something he wasn't saying, something more sinister beneath the surface. Morning came, and I hoped it was all in my head, but then I saw him again, Dave, in the hallway. He glanced at me, that same eerie smile on his face, sending a shiver down my spine. It felt like a warning, like he was enjoying this twisted game. I tried to keep my distance, avoiding any interaction, but his presence lingered, a constant reminder of that disturbing encounter. It felt like he was always watching, always waiting for an opportunity to strike. I couldn't focus, couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that clung to me like a shadow. Every little noise made me jump, and I found myself constantly checking the peephole, half expecting to see him standing there again, that unsettling grin fixed on his face. I debated talking to someone about it, maybe the landlord or the police, but what could I say? That my neighbor gave me the creeps. It sounded paranoid, even to me. But every passing hour made it harder to dismiss, harder to ignore the chilling feeling that Dave was a ticking time bomb. Days passed, and the tension hung heavy in the air. I started avoiding going out alone, always looking over my shoulder, always wary of encountering him. It felt like I was a prisoner in my own home, a constant state of vigilance, fearing what might happen next. And then, last night, it happened again. A knock at the door, late, too late for any reasonable visit. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest, and when I finally peeked through the peephole, there he was, Dave, that same twisted smile, that same unsettling gaze fixed on my door. I froze, dread pooling in my stomach. I knew I had to call for help, to do something, but fear paralyzed me. He kept knocking, this rhythmic pattern that felt like a threat, a looming danger inching closer. I backed away from the door, phone in hand, fingers trembling as I dialed 911. But before I could hit call, the knocking stopped. Silence enveloped the hallway, and I cautiously glanced through the peephole again. He was gone, vanished into the night, leaving behind this chilling sense of impending danger. I spent the night wide awake, alert to every sound, every shadow, fearing he might return. Morning brought some relief, but the fear lingered, the sense of being a target, of being watched by someone who seemed unhinged. I knew I couldn't stay there, in that constant state of fear, in the shadow of Dave's unsettling presence. I packed my essentials and headed to a friend's place, seeking solace and safety away from the haunting encounter. It's been a few days now, and I'm still on edge, haunted by the memory of those chilling encounters. I reported it to the landlord, to the authorities, hoping that they'll take it seriously, and yet to await an outcome. I moved into this quiet neighborhood a few months ago, looking for a fresh start. The people seemed nice enough, and the community was peaceful. So when a new neighbor moved in a few houses down, everyone was curious, excited to welcome them. I received an invitation from the new neighbor, a casual get-together with other residents. It sounded pleasant, a chance to socialize and get to know the people living nearby. I grabbed a bottle of wine and headed to the gathering. The evening was warm, the atmosphere jovial, laughter filling the air. The new neighbor, Mark, seemed amiable, effortlessly charming, drawing everyone in with his anecdotes and charisma. But as the night wore on, people began to filter out until it was just Mark and me. At first, it was harmless chatter, the kind of small talk you engage in with a neighbor. But then, something shifted in the air. Mark's demeanor changed, his smiles turned colder, his eyes betraying a sense of something darker beneath the surface. I made an excuse to leave, trying to brush off the uneasy feeling that had crept in. But as I turned to go, he insisted on walking me home, claiming it was too late for me to be out alone. As we walked, Mark's conversation took a sinister turn. He spoke of things that made my skin crawl, unsettling ideas and comments that hinted at something deeply unsettling. His words dripped with an eerie intensity, a kind of malice that sent a chill down my spine. I quickened my pace, trying to distance myself from him, but he matched every step. The air was thick with tension, the street empty and silent except for our footsteps echoing against the pavement. I tried to remain composed, masking the rising panic within me, but it was impossible to shake off the feeling that I was in danger. Mark's words became more threatening, his tone shifting to something darker, filled with hints of violence. I finally reached my door, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned to bid him good night, hoping he would leave, but he stood there, his gaze fixed on me, unnervingly intense. As I reached for the doorknob, Mark lunged forward, his hand clasping mine, preventing me from closing the door. Fear surged through me, and I struggled to free myself from his grip, my mind racing for an escape plan. His demeanor had transformed completely, his eyes devoid of any warmth, locked on me with a predatory focus. I tried to push him away, but his grip tightened, his face contorted into a chilling expression. He leaned in closer, his breath hot against my skin, and whispered something that sent a shiver down my spine. I fought harder, desperation lending strength to my efforts as I finally managed to slam the door shut, locking it behind me. I stood there, trembling, listening for any signs of him outside. The house felt suffocatingly silent, every creak sounding like an impending threat. I rushed to secure all the doors and windows, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The fear in me was overwhelming, the encounter with Mark leaving me on edge, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. I couldn't shake off the feeling that he was still lurking outside, watching, waiting for an opportunity. I paced the house, every shadow morphing into a potential threat, my senses heightened to the slightest sound. The night stretched on, the minutes feeling like hours, my nerves frayed, teetering on the brink of panic. I debated calling the police, but what would I tell them? It was a gut feeling, an intuition that I couldn't articulate into coherent words. I felt trapped, isolated within the walls of my own home. The night was long and restless, each passing minute a battle between fear and exhaustion. Every sound, every whisper of the wind outside seemed amplified, tormenting me with the uncertainty of whether Mark was still out there, lurking in the shadows. Dawn finally broke, the light filtering through the windows, bringing a sliver of relief. I cautiously peeked outside, scanning the street, but there was no sign of Mark. I've been living on this quiet street for a while now, and things have been pretty uneventful, peaceful even. But there's this one house that always caught my attention. It's not the architecture or anything like that, it's the neighbor who lives there. No one seems to know much about him. He moved in about a year ago, and since then, he's been this enigmatic figure, always in the shadows. I've never seen him talk to anyone, never seen him venture outside his property. It's like he's deliberately trying to avoid contact. Rumors floated around the neighborhood about his reclusiveness, some even speculated he might be hiding something. But it was all just talk, mere gossip. I'd catch glimpses of him occasionally, usually at dusk or late at night, moving around in his house, always alone. There was this unsettling air about him, this aura that seemed to repel any interaction. Last night, I had this strange feeling, this nagging sense that someone was watching me. I brushed it off at first, thinking it was just paranoia. But as the night crept in, that feeling intensified, became this almost suffocating sensation. It was well past midnight when I decided to peek out of my window, just to ease my mind. And that's when I saw him, the mysterious neighbor. He was standing in his yard, right beneath the streetlight, staring straight at my house. My heart skipped a beat. It was eerie, his face almost ghostly in the dim light, his eyes fixed on my window. I could feel this chill creeping down my spine, this sense of unease that I couldn't shake off. I quickly drew the curtains, trying to push away the fear that was settling in. I told myself it was just a weird coincidence, that maybe he was just staring into space, lost in his thoughts. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Something felt wrong. I couldn't sleep, kept tossing and turning, the image of him standing there etched in my mind. Every creak of the house made me flinch, every shadow seemed like it was moving. I felt this overwhelming dread, this certainty that something was about to happen. Morning came, and I tried to shake off the unease, tried to convince myself it was all in my head. But as I stepped out to grab the morning paper, there he was again, just standing on his porch, this time, staring directly at me. I felt this chill ripple through me, this mixture of fear and confusion. It was like he was watching my every move, studying me from a distance. I hurried back inside, my heart racing, feeling this sense of being under scrutiny, like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. I tried to push it aside, tried to go about my day as usual, but I couldn't shake off that feeling of being observed, of being under his strange, intense gaze. Night fell again, and I made sure all my doors and windows were locked. I was on edge, expecting something, anything. And then, there was this sudden knock at my door, this loud, jarring sound that echoed through the silence of the night. I froze, my heart pounding against my chest. I peered through the peephole, and there he was, standing on my porch, his expression unreadable. My mind raced, trying to figure out why he was there, why he chose this time to come knocking. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. I debated calling the police, but what could I say? That my neighbor was just standing at my door? It didn't sound alarming enough to warrant their attention. So, I stood there, waiting, hoping he'd just leave. But he didn't budge, just kept staring at the door, this unsettling stillness about him. It felt wrong, this intrusion into my space, this unnerving presence just outside my home. I finally mustered the courage to speak, asking what he wanted. There was no response, just this unnerving silence that stretched between us. And then, he slowly raised his hand, pointing at me, this unsettling gesture that sent shivers down my spine. I felt this rush of panic, this surge of fear that gripped me. Without another word, I shut the blinds, retreating into the safety of my home, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, every little sound making me jump, every shadow seeming like a looming threat. It felt like I was being watched, like his presence was still there, lurking in the darkness. Morning couldn't come soon enough, and I made sure to avoid any glimpse outside. I didn't want to see him, didn't want to acknowledge that chilling encounter. It's been a few days now, and I still can't shake off that feeling of being watched, of being scrutinized by my mysterious neighbor. I've tried to go about my routine, but every time I step outside, it feels like his eyes are on me, this unsettling weight that refuses to lift. I don't know what to do, how to shake off this fear. I'd moved into this apartment complex about 6 months ago. Everything seemed great at first. Quiet neighborhood, nice neighbors, you know, the usual. But one neighbor, Mike, living 2 doors down, started acting weird. He'd say things like, "Hey, we should hang out sometime," or just show up unexpectedly at my door with some excuse. I didn't want to be rude, so I'd chat for a bit, but his vibe was off. Something about the way he looked at me, a bit too intense. I thought, maybe he's just trying to be friendly, but it started to feel uncomfortable, like he was pushing boundaries. One day, it crossed a line. I was carrying groceries and struggling with the bags when he suddenly appeared, offering help. I thanked him but said I had it covered. He grabbed the bags anyway, saying he insisted, and followed me inside without waiting for an invitation. I didn't know how to get him to leave without causing a scene. Inside, he lingered, making small talk, but there was this tension, this feeling that things weren't right. I tried to wrap up the conversation, but he wouldn't take the hint. When he finally left, I felt this sense of relief. After that, he'd sometimes knock on my door late at night, asking if I wanted to watch a movie or have a drink. I'd politely decline, but he'd linger, insisting that I should come over for a drink or dinner. One evening, it was around 11 p.m., I was watching TV when I heard a knock. I assumed it was a delivery or something, but when I checked, it was Mike again. He seemed more insistent this time, like he really wanted me to go to his place. I firmly declined, saying I was about to sleep. He didn't budge, kept insisting, and that's when things got unnerving. His demeanor shifted, his tone turned aggressive. He was demanding and persistent, saying I owed him for his friendship. It was unnerving, to say the least. I shut the door, my heart pounding. I thought it was over, but then the knocking started again, louder and more forceful. I panicked, unsure of what to do, feeling trapped in my own home. I called the building's security, and they said they'd send someone over. The knocking continued, growing louder and more relentless. I was terrified. I locked myself in the bathroom, holding my breath, trying to stay quiet, hoping he'd give up and leave. The knocking finally stopped after what felt like hours. I didn't hear anything for a while, but I was too scared to come out. When the security finally arrived, they searched the building, but he was gone. They assured me they'd keep an eye out, but I couldn't shake off that fear, that sense of violation. I barely slept that night, and in the morning, I felt this mixture of relief and anxiety. I didn't know if he'd come back or if I'd be safe. I decided to file a complaint with the landlord, hoping they could do something about it. Days passed, and things seemed okay for a while. But then, one night, I heard this tapping on my window. I froze, thinking it was him. I peeked through the blinds, and there he was, staring right at me. I felt this chill run down my spine. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there, paralyzed by fear. He didn't say anything, just stood there, this menacing stare that made my skin crawl. I closed the blinds and called the police this time. They showed up quickly, but when they arrived, he was gone. I couldn't live like this, feeling constantly watched and frightened. I spoke to the landlord again, pleading for something to be done. They promised to take action and spoke to him, warning him about his behavior. I hoped it was over, but I still felt this lingering dread. I didn't know what he was capable of or what might happen next. I started looking into ways to move out, to get away from this nightmare that was unfolding. I was packing my things one afternoon when I heard a knock. My heart sank. I didn't want to answer, but then I heard his voice, almost pleading, saying he just wanted to talk. I felt this mix of fear and anger, this violation of my space. I opened the door, determined to make it clear that I wanted him to leave me alone. But when I did, he forced his way in, saying he wouldn't leave until we talked. I tried to push him out, but he was stronger. His demeanor was different, this intensity that made my blood run cold. I screamed, hoping someone would hear, but it felt like we were the only ones in the building. I felt this overwhelming sense of vulnerability, this fear that I might not make it out of this unscathed. He backed me into a corner, this menacing look in his eyes. I was shaking, trying to find a way out, feeling this sheer terror taking over. I thought I was going to be harmed, that this nightmare would escalate into something worse. Just when I thought it couldn't get any scarier, there was this loud banging on the door. It was the police, responding to the call I'd made earlier. They barged in, pulling him away from me, and finally, it was over. I was shaking, tears streaming down my face, feeling this immense relief flooding through me. They arrested him, and I don't know what would have happened if they hadn't shown up when they did. I moved out that very day, unable to stay in a place that had turned into a living nightmare. I didn't want to be anywhere near that neighborhood, near that apartment complex, near him. It was the scariest experience of my life, something I wouldn't wish on anyone. I moved into this quiet suburban neighborhood a couple of years ago, looking for a bit of peace and solitude. But things took a strange turn when this new neighbor, Diana, moved in next door. She seemed friendly enough at first, but her behavior started getting really odd. I noticed her wandering around my yard, not just close to the property line, but actually stepping into my space. At first, I thought maybe she was just disoriented, but it became a pattern. I'd see her through the window, lingering near my house, almost like she was checking it out. I decided to confront her about it, just to clear things up. I walked over to her place, knocked on the door, and when she answered, I tried to be polite, asking if everything was okay. She brushed it off, saying she was exploring the neighborhood. I let it slide, but then things got weirder. I'd hear noises outside my house at odd hours, like someone rummaging around. One night, I peeked out and saw her, flashlight in hand, snooping around my backyard. I didn't want to escalate things, so I let it go, but it was really unsettling. The tension kept building. One afternoon, I was working in the backyard, and she just strolled right in, uninvited, acting like it was the most normal thing in the world. I told her politely that she couldn't just come into my yard like that, but she got defensive, claiming she was just looking for something she'd lost. She lingered, asking strange questions about my house and my schedule. It felt invasive, uncomfortable. I tried to wrap up the conversation, but she wasn't getting the message. She wouldn't leave until she checked every corner of the yard. The breaking point came when I found her standing on my porch one night, just staring at the front door. It was unnerving, this invasion of my personal space. I asked her what she was doing, but she just smiled, this eerie smile that sent chills down my spine. She said she liked the view from my porch and that she'd like to come in for a chat. I firmly told her no, feeling this rising sense of unease. She didn't seem to understand boundaries, and I was starting to feel threatened. I couldn't have someone like that lurking around my home. I closed and locked the door, double-checking all the windows. I didn't sleep well that night, this constant worry that she might come back or do something unexpected. The next day, I decided to install security cameras, just in case. Days passed without incident, but then I noticed something strange on the footage. There she was, in the middle of the night, skulking around my yard, looking into the windows. I felt this knot in my stomach, this creeping fear that she was fixated on my house for some reason. I went to her house, trying to reason with her, to make her understand that this wasn't normal behavior. But she was dismissive, acting like I was overreacting. I felt this sense of powerlessness, not knowing what she might do next or how far she'd go. One night, I heard noises outside, this shuffling, like someone was trying to open a window. I checked the cameras, and there she was, right at my back door, fiddling with the lock. I panicked, called the police, but by the time they arrived, she was gone. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, this constant fear that she'd come back and try something worse. I kept the doors locked at all times, but it didn't ease the paranoia, the sense of violation. One evening, I was watching TV when I heard this tapping on the window. I turned, and there she was, staring right at me from my own yard. I felt this surge of adrenaline, this primal fear taking over. I shut the blinds, locked myself in the bedroom, and called the police. They came and talked to her, warned her about her behavior, but it didn't seem to faze her. She'd just stare back, this unsettling blank look, like she was oblivious to the gravity of her actions. I felt trapped, this constant worry that I was being watched, that she might try something worse. I started looking into moving out, wanting to get away from this terrifying situation, from her, from that house. It felt like I was living in a horror movie, with no end in sight. One night, I was in bed, and I heard this sound, like someone was trying to force the front door open. My heart raced, and I grabbed my phone, ready to call for help. I peeked out, and there she was, at the door, trying to break in. I yelled, told her I was calling the police, hoping it would scare her off, but she just laughed, this chilling, eerie laughter. She said something about wanting to talk, to discuss our future. I felt this overwhelming fear, this sense of being utterly helpless. I called the police, and they rushed over, but by the time they arrived, she was gone again. They tried to reassure me, but I couldn't shake off this terror that she might come back, that she might do something worse. I spent sleepless nights, jumping at every sound, every creak of the floorboards, terrified that she'd break in or that I'd wake up to find her standing in my room. Finally, I made the decision to leave, to get away from that place, from her, from the fear. I packed up my things, left behind that house that had turned into a living nightmare. I moved to a new town, changed my number, hoping to leave it all behind. But that fear, that paranoia, it lingered. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, of her lurking around every corner. It was a terror that followed me, a constant reminder of what I'd experienced. It was the most terrifying period of my life, this sense of vulnerability, this invasion of my safe space. I don't think I'll ever forget the chilling encounters, the fear that took hold, or the haunting thought that it might happen again. I moved into this apartment complex a while back, and everything was pretty normal at first. But then I noticed something odd about my neighbor, Sarah. She used to be this friendly, cheerful person, always waving and saying hi in the hallway. Lately, though, things seemed different. I'd see her pacing in the corridor, muttering to herself, and she looked more and more disheveled each time I saw her. I thought maybe she was going through a tough time or something. But then I started noticing these unsettling things. There were strange sounds coming from her apartment late at night, like loud thuds and banging noises. Sometimes I'd hear her yelling or crying, and it just didn't seem right. I wanted to check on her, see if everything was okay, but I didn't want to intrude. One day, I ran into her in the hallway, and she seemed completely off, like she didn't recognize me. She was murmuring to herself, this blank look in her eyes. I tried talking to her, asking if everything was all right, but she just mumbled something and walked away. Things got worse. I'd see her standing by her window, staring out for hours, not moving, not doing anything. It was like she was in a trance or something. I started feeling this unease, this worry about her mental state. One night, I was heading to bed when I heard this blood-curdling scream coming from her apartment. I froze, not knowing what to do. I debated calling the police, but I didn't want to overreact. I hoped maybe it was a one-time thing, but it just kept happening, these strange outbursts and screams in the dead of night. I knocked on her door once, asking if everything was all right, but she just slammed it shut. I felt this chill run down my spine, this sinking feeling that something wasn't right with her. I couldn't shake off the fear that she might hurt herself or someone else. Her behavior became increasingly erratic. I'd catch glimpses of her through the peephole pacing in circles, talking to herself in hushed tones. I thought about talking to the building management, maybe getting her some help, but I didn't want to betray her privacy. One evening, I heard this loud crash from her place. It sounded like furniture being thrown around. I debated whether to call for help, but I hesitated, hoping it might just be an accident. I didn't want to interfere or make things worse. But then I started noticing marks on her door, these strange symbols and words scribbled in what looked like blood. It sent shivers down my spine, this sense of foreboding, like something was seriously wrong. I knocked again, concerned, but she didn't answer. That's when I noticed the smell, this foul, putrid odor seeping from under her door. It was unbearable. I felt this fear knot in my stomach, this gnawing sense of dread. I knew something was terribly wrong in there. I called emergency services, trying to explain the situation, but by the time they arrived, it was too late. They broke down her door and found her, in this state of distress, talking to herself, surrounded by a mess of broken furniture and strange symbols on the walls. They took her away, but I couldn't shake off that image. It was haunting, this descent into madness. I didn't know what had triggered it, what had caused her mental state to deteriorate so rapidly. It was like watching a horror movie unfold right next door. The whole experience left me shaken. I kept thinking about what she'd gone through, what had led her to that point. I wondered if there was something I could have done, some way I could have helped her before it reached the terrifying point. It's the kind of thing that stays with you, that makes you question everything. I moved into this new apartment, thrilled about starting fresh in a new neighborhood. Things were going great, but then there was my neighbor, Mr. Thompson. He seemed friendly enough at first, but as time went on, I noticed some weird things about him. He'd spend hours in his garage, tinkering with all sorts of odd contraptions and tools. Nothing too alarming, just a guy who liked to work on DIY projects, or so I thought. But then, the noises started. Strange clanks and whirs would echo through the walls late into the night. Sometimes, it sounded like he was hammering against metal or sawing something heavy. I'd catch glimpses of him carrying boxes into his garage, big ones. And the strange part? He always seemed to be doing this in the dead of night, like he was trying to avoid being seen. I tried not to think too much of it, but the curiosity gnawed at me. Then there were these occasional pungent odors seeping through the vents. Chemical-like smells that made me dizzy. I'd see his windows fogged up as if he'd been working with some intense fumes. I was getting more curious and worried about what he was up to. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? It's not like I wanted to pry or anything, but there was this growing sense of unease, this feeling that something wasn't right. One night, I couldn't sleep, and it was past midnight when I heard the strangest noise from his place. It was this muffled, frantic banging, like someone trapped or struggling against something. I felt this chill run down my spine. I mean, it's one thing to have a hobby, but this was eerie. I wanted to check on him, make sure everything was okay, but I was scared too, you know? So, I hesitated, debating whether to call for help or knock on his door. The noise stopped, and everything went silent. I tried to tell myself it was probably just some DIY project gone wrong. But then things took a sinister turn. The neighborhood pets started disappearing, and that's when my concern turned to fear. I'd see him dragging these heavy bags into his garage, and it made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't shake off this feeling that something terrible was happening right next door. One evening, I saw him in the hallway. He had this wild look in his eyes, this unsettling grin that sent shivers down my spine. He tried to make small talk, but there was something off about him, this intense energy that set me on edge. That night, I heard more noises, these guttural, muffled cries that echoed through the walls. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to do something. I mustered up the courage to knock on his door, hoping to confront him or at least offer help. When he opened the door, that's when I saw it. The room behind him was covered in plastic sheets, the floor stained with something dark and viscous. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I was frozen, unable to move or speak. There was this overwhelming feeling of terror, this gut instinct that I was in real danger. He tried to smile, but it was menacing, like he knew something I didn't. His eyes darted around, and I felt this panic rising inside me. I stammered, trying to ask about the noises, but he just laughed it off, saying it was his latest project and that I shouldn't worry. I mumbled something about leaving him to his work and practically ran back to my apartment. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I locked the door and called the police, trying to explain what I'd seen and heard. They arrived quickly, but when they knocked on Mr. Thompson's door, he didn't answer. They checked around the property and found nothing out of the ordinary. They assured me they'd look into it, but I couldn't shake off that feeling of dread. I started noticing odd things outside his place, holes dug in the backyard, freshly poured concrete slabs. I was petrified, feeling like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I couldn't sleep that night, or the next. Every noise made me jump, every creak in the building felt like him coming for me. The fear was paralyzing, this sense of impending danger lurking just a wall away. The police kept investigating, but there was no sign of Mr. Thompson. Days turned into weeks, and the neighborhood was on edge. There were rumors, whispers of strange happenings, but nothing concrete. I felt like I was losing my mind, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid to leave my apartment. I hear noises from his place now and then, but whenever I glanced out my window, everything seemed normal. Then one day, the police discovered something chilling. They found a hidden compartment in his garage, and it was a scene straight out of a horror movie. Tools, bloodstains, and something that looked like a cage. It was confirmed he was wanted in connection with a series of disappearances in the area. I felt sick, thinking about how close I'd been to whatever horrors he'd been involved in. The relief of knowing he was caught mingled with this overwhelming fear of what could have happened. I moved out soon after, trying to leave it all behind, but the memory of those days, the terror I felt, it's something that still haunts me. The thought that I was living next to someone capable of such horrors is so disturbing. I can feel my heart racing just thinking about that night. It was like any other evening, nothing out of the ordinary. I'd been busy inside, trying to unwind after a long day. Then, when I glanced out the window, I saw him, Mr. Harris, lurking near the fence, peering into my garden. It sent this chill down my spine. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe he dropped something in my yard. But there was something unsettling about the way he was staring. It wasn't a friendly neighborly gaze. It was this intense, eerie stare. I felt this cold shiver run through me, this sudden wave of unease. I mean, it was late, and why on earth would he be in my garden at this time? The more I thought about it, the more my heart pounded with fear. I tried to tell myself it was just a misunderstanding, but I couldn't shake off this sense of danger. I knew I had to confront him, ask him what he was doing, but I was terrified. What if he was up to something sinister? What if he meant harm? I stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do. I mustered up the courage to step outside. As soon as I did, he scurried away, disappearing into the night. The fear twisted my stomach into knots. I tried to tell myself it was probably nothing, that maybe he was just looking for his pet or something. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I couldn't sleep that night. Every little creak outside made me jump. Every shadow seemed like him lurking in the darkness. I kept the lights on, feeling this overwhelming sense of vulnerability. It was like my safe space had been violated. The next day, I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe it was just a one-time thing. But then, I noticed more strange behavior. He'd always find some excuse to pass by my house, sometimes lingering a bit too long, looking in my direction. It made me feel like prey being watched by a predator. I felt this increasing dread whenever I saw him outside. I didn't know how to deal with it. Should I confront him? Ignore it? I was scared to do either. The whole situation felt suffocating, like I was trapped in this twisted game I never signed up for. Then came the night when it all escalated. I was in my kitchen, washing dishes when I glanced out the window again. And there he was, in my garden, this time closer, almost pressed against the glass. My heart thundered in my chest, and this overwhelming fear gripped me. I didn't know what he was up to, and I didn't want to find out. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but when I looked back, he was gone. That was the breaking point for me. I couldn't live in this constant state of terror, wondering if he'd show up again, wondering what he wanted. I called the police and explained everything, how he'd been lurking around my house, how it was making me feel unsafe. They promised to patrol the area more often, but said there wasn't much they could do unless he did something more threatening. I felt this mixture of relief and frustration. I mean, What if he did something more sinister next time? What if he tried to break in? I didn't want to wait for things to get worse. I installed security cameras, added more locks to my doors and windows, anything to feel a bit safer. But every night, I'd still glance out the window, half expecting to see him lurking in the shadows. I started losing sleep, jumping at every sound outside, afraid to be alone in my own home. It was like living in this constant state of terror. I'd keep my lights on, double-check all the locks before going to bed, but it never felt like enough. Eventually, I decided to move. I couldn't take it anymore. The fear was consuming me, making me feel trapped and helpless in my own home. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd driven me away, but I couldn't stay there another day. I packed up and left, hoping that wherever I moved to, I'd find peace again. I'm sitting in my living room light. It's late, and the only sounds are the distant hum of the air conditioner and the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall. My mind is foggy from a late-night movie binge, and I'm ready to turn in. Suddenly, there's a sharp knock on the door. I glance at the clock, and it reads 2 a.m. Who could it be at this hour? I approach the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. It's Terrence, my next-door neighbor. He's always been odd, but this was different. His eyes were wild, like he wasn't entirely there, and he was clutching a small metal bowl in one hand. I opened the door just a crack, trying to keep my voice steady. Terrence, what are you doing here so late? He starts rambling about purification, saying he needs to cleanse my home. It made no sense. I try to politely refuse, but he insists, his voice growing more agitated. He's muttering something about saving my soul, his words becoming more frantic and disturbing by the second. My heart's pounding. I'm scared. This isn't the Terrence I know. I try to gently shut the door, but he shoves his foot in the doorway, preventing me from closing it. His eyes are intense, and there's this eerie determination in his gaze that sends shivers down my spine. Panic sets in. I push with all my strength, trying to close the door, but he's stronger. He pushes back, his voice escalating into this frenzied chant about purifying me, purging me of something sinister. I don't understand. I'm terrified. Adrenaline floods my system. I break free, stumbling backward, scrambling for the phone. I dial 911, my voice shaking as I try to explain the situation to the operator. But as I'm speaking, I hear a loud crash from the front door. Terrence has broken in. I flee, darting through the house, looking for any means of escape. It's like a nightmare. My heart's racing, my mind's in overdrive, searching for a way out. I hear him, his footsteps behind me, chanting something under his breath. I can't make out the words, they're distorted and haunting. I reach the back door, but it's locked. In a panic, I fumble with the key, struggling to unlock it. Every second feels like an eternity. I glance over my shoulder, and there he is, right behind me, this maniacal expression on his face. I manage to unlock the door and fling it open, racing into the backyard, my bare feet pounding on the cold ground. But I can't stop. I can't look back. I just run. I hear Terrence's voice echoing behind me, getting louder, and it's like he's everywhere, his chilling words echoing in the night. I'm sprinting, fueled by fear, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. I finally see my chance, the tall fence at the end of the yard. I vault over it, landing on the other side, and keep running, my heart in my throat. I don't know where I'm going. I just need to get away. The adrenaline starts to ebb, replaced by sheer exhaustion and this overwhelming sense of dread. I find myself in a nearby alley, hidden in the shadows, trying to catch my breath, praying that he hasn't followed. Minutes pass, maybe hours, I can't tell. Fear grips me, wondering if he's out there, waiting for me to reappear. I don't know how long I cower there, paralyzed by fear. Eventually, I gather the courage to peek out, to check if he's gone. The street seems empty, eerily quiet. I cautiously emerge from the alley, every sense on high alert, scanning my surroundings, looking for any sign of danger. I make my way to a neighbor's house, pounding on their door, desperate for help. They let me in, and I'm shaking, tears streaming down my face as I try to explain what happened. The police arrive soon after, and I recount the terrifying ordeal. They search for Terrence, but he's nowhere to be found. It's like he vanished into thin air. They assure me they'll keep an eye out for him, but they can't promise much else. I'm left shaken, traumatized by the night's events. I can't sleep, can't shake off the feeling that Terrence might return, that I'm not safe. The police patrol the area more often, but it doesn't ease the constant fear that lingers within me. It's a nightmare, a living nightmare that I can't escape. I look at my home, my safe haven, and it feels violated. I can't shake off the image of Terrence, the manic look in his eyes, the terrifying obsession with this bizarre purification. I was living in this quaint little neighborhood, a place where everyone knew each other's names, exchanged pleasantries, but there was always this one neighbor who seemed a bit off. His name was Craig. Craig was friendly enough at first, but there was something unsettling about his intense gaze and how he'd often linger a little too long in conversation. It all started with something so trivial, a simple dispute over the property line. I'd noticed some of his stuff creeping onto my side, and I politely mentioned it to him. That's when things took a turn. He got defensive, started yelling, accusing me of trying to take over his space. His tone was aggressive, intimidating. I didn't want any trouble, so I backed off, hoping it would blow over. But it didn't. His attitude towards me changed drastically. He'd glare when we passed each other, muttering under his breath. It was like living on edge, wondering when the next confrontation would happen. One evening, I was in the backyard, just trying to unwind after a long day. I heard this loud banging noise, like someone repeatedly slamming a door. My heart raced as I realized it was coming from Craig's place. I glanced over and saw him, wild-eyed and furious, pacing back and forth in his yard. I pretended not to notice, trying to go about my business, but he kept staring at me, this unsettling intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I went inside, trying to shrug it off, but it felt like he was watching me, like he was waiting for something. Later that night, there was this persistent knocking on my front door. It was late, far too late for anyone to be visiting. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me, and I approached cautiously. When I opened the door, there he was, Craig, towering over me, his eyes burning with this intense rage. I tried to keep my voice steady, asked him what he wanted, but he just glared at me, this chilling silence hanging between us. Then, without a word, he tried to barge in. I managed to slam the door shut, fumbling for the lock, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear him outside, banging on the door, demanding to be let in, shouting obscenities. I called the police, my voice trembling as I tried to explain the situation. But while I was on the phone, the banging stopped. It was quiet, almost too quiet. I peeked through the window, and there he was, just standing in the yard, staring at my house with this sinister look. The police arrived, and I told them what happened. They spoke to Greg, but he denied everything, claimed he was just out for a walk. They couldn't do much without evidence, and it was his word against mine. I felt this sense of dread settle over me. I didn't feel safe in my own home anymore. Every noise outside made me jump, every shadow felt like a threat. I started keeping all the doors and windows locked, constantly looking over my shoulder. Days passed, and things seemed to quiet down. But there was this constant feeling of being watched, this lingering fear that he was still out there, waiting for the right moment. Then one night, I woke up to this strange scraping sound coming from outside my bedroom window. I summoned all my courage and peeked out. It was Greg, his face contorted into this twisted grin, scraping something against the glass. I froze in terror, unable to move or scream. He seemed to enjoy my fear, relishing in it. I couldn't comprehend what he was doing or what his intentions were, but it was chilling, to say the least. I called the police again, my voice shaking as I tried to convey the urgency of the situation. They arrived quickly, but by the time they got there, Greg was gone. They searched the area, but there was no sign of him. The police suggested getting a restraining order, but that wouldn't keep him away if he was determined. I felt trapped, like there was no escape from this relentless fear, this looming threat that Greg posed. I stayed with a friend for a while, hoping to feel safe again, but every time I returned home, it felt like stepping into a nightmare. I never knew when he'd show up, or I'd have to face the terrifying encounter again. I couldn't live like that, in constant fear. Eventually, I made the difficult decision to move away, to start fresh somewhere else, away from Greg and the haunting memories of that unsettling, terrifying time. It was a chapter one wanted to erase from my life, but one that I knew would linger in my nightmares for a long time to come.